What does the Denver Broncos practice squad look like after roster cuts initially happen? We're going to get that much more and a cup of coffee with Good Morning Broncos. What's up, Broncos country? Good morning. Welcome to another episode of GMB here on Mile High Sports. Every team, every day. Thank you so much for taking time to have a cup of coffee with us as we break down everything that's going on with the Denver Broncos. And real quick, just a reminder, hey, if you want Colorado sports coverage here, we have you with every professional sports team. You get GMB with me every single weekday, Monday through Friday at 9 o'clock a.m. Mountain Time. You get some coverage of the Colorado Avalanche with Arif Dean, our Mile High Sports Avs beat reporter. Our other beat reporters include Ryan Blackburn covering the Denver Nuggets. You get the Pickaxe and Roll podcast where I'll be making an appearance next week to kind of hype up the Broncos season there to Nuggets fans. And you have Drew Kreisman on the Colorado Rockies. So make sure, hey, you love Colorado sports, subscribe to the channel down below so you never miss out on all the action that we have going for you here. Mile High Sports, every team, every day. Like I mentioned, a special shout out to our good friends over there at Superbook Sports for sponsoring today's episode of the show here. But what we're going to break down here this morning, the Broncos will have one practice a little bit here early on this morning before they have their luncheon event a little bit later on in the afternoon. And we won't be back at practice, I think, next week until Wednesday. So, hey, game prep week for the Raiders, it's coming next week. And I think that's a big thing here for Broncos country. But let's talk about what we observed during Wednesday's practice at the Centura Health Training Center. Now, fresh off of 53-man roster cuts, the Broncos were back in action out there on the practice field. The next roster construction thing that they had to take part of early on Wednesday morning was building their 16-man practice squad here. So let's take a look at which players make up the practice squad. At quarterback, you got Ben DiNucci making his return, was with the team all throughout OTAs and training camp. Tyler Beatty making his return at the running back position alongside Dwayne Washington, who has former familiarity with Sean Payton, can also play special teams. So two backs on the 16-man practice squad, which is a nice sign here for Denver as they have three running backs on their active roster. PJ Mustipher and Tyler Lancaster make up the defensive tackle position, two pieces that you're going to add to the practice squad here. But two new faces at the wide receiver position. You've got Philip Dorsett, played for the Houston Texans last season. He had 20 catches on the year. 11 of those catches were chain movers for a first down. And so very interesting to see, okay, hey, with Denver having four wide receivers on the active roster being Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Brandon Johnson, and Marvin Mims, this now allows the Broncos to have some additional bodies to potentially elevate on game day to give them more players at that position, right? So Philip Dorsett is one of those options. We know little Jordan Humphrey back on the practice squad. His size gives the Broncos some advantages as well that they could potentially use inside the red zone there. And then a new wide receiver that we're also going to add to the mix as well, David Sills V. And if you look his name up on Twitter, you're going to see a lot of Giants fans are upset that he's not on the New York Giants and that he's now on the Denver Broncos. 6'3", has some athletic traits to him. I read something when he was at college in his final two seasons, he accounted, I think, for 30 or 33 total touchdowns in 2 years. That is insane level of production. And I also found out he's a former quarterback, but he made the transition to wide receiver. So you like to see maybe some success stories there. Had some impact plays for them in the preseason for the New York Giants, but he's now a member of the Denver Broncos. Sean Payton, his coaching staff, they liked what they saw, and that's why he's now on their practice squad here going forward. Michael Bandy, obviously his former familiarity with Joe Lombardi kind of sticks on, and him being another practice squad wide receiver there. So Denver has a total of 4 wide receivers on the practice squad that they have the opportunity to utilize going forward. So that's some good news there. Now let's talk about the offensive line here now for the Broncos. Will Sherman, obviously former CU Buff, was on the practice squad last year for Denver, is back in the fold on the practice squad here. The team really likes maybe where he's at from a developmental standpoint, maybe some of the strides that he's taken. And hey, it's good to have good offensive linemen there, and they see enough in him to keep developing him here in Denver. So that's a good sign there. Art Green at the cornerback position. He is making his return, obviously, for them. He was an undrafted rookie free agent. They like some of his measurables, that he has some athleticism, good size at the cornerback spot. needs a little bit more work, and that's exactly what the practice squad is going to be for him. Outside linebacker Marcus Haynes, he's back in the fold here. As you saw, he wore the number 52 during the preseason. He'll be back into the mix at practice more than likely here today. And then we talk about DeMontre Jacobs, offensive tackle, number 71, another undrafted rookie free agent that, unfortunately, in the last preseason game against the Los Angeles Rams, he suffered an ankle and a knee sprain on the same play after getting rolled up on. But all signs point that he's going to be fine here, especially as the practice squad continues to formulate. I did see him at practice, but he did not participate, did not have a helmet, was in a jersey, went off to the side field, did some limited stuff, and then didn't do much. And obviously, when you have an ankle and a knee sprain, you don't want to mess anything else up, and you got to be able to restrict your movement there a little bit. So we'll dive a little bit deeper into some injuries and what we saw in the injury report initially from Wednesday's practice at the Centura Health Training Center. And then Haggai Chisholm-Ndubuisi, the Broncos International Player Pathway Program participant, is on the practice squad. Doesn't necessarily count against their initial 16-man roster. You're going to see 17 total players here on Denver's roster. He doesn't necessarily count against it. Something to keep an eye on there. Devon Key at safety. They like what he was able to do all throughout OTAs and all throughout minicamp and training camp. And I thought he had a pretty impressive preseason at the safety position. He was number 38, the other number 38 here on the Broncos. I imagine with Jaleel McLaughlin making the active roster, Devon Key more than likely is going to have to choose a new number here very, very soon, or we'll see if they allow him to keep the same jersey number because he's a practice squad player. Interesting things to kind of monitor here. And then Lucas Kroll, former tight end of the New Orleans Saints, and I know exactly what a lot of people in Broncos country are going to be saying here. Another New Orleans Saints player. This guy has no former ties here to Sean Payton, but it was interesting to note here that he actually led the Saints tight ends in receiving yards. I think he had 10 catches for $136 in 3 preseason games. So good size to him, and obviously a big body, has some pretty good athleticism to him as well. Could be a little bit of a steal and stash here on the Broncos practice squad for Sean Payton. But that will wrap up the Broncos 16-man practice squad. And look, this is going to change more than likely over the course of the next week or two, maybe even 3 weeks. Sean Payton has alluded to that. The 53-man roster, as it was initially set, will not exactly look how it is right now, maybe a day from now. And we'll dive a little bit deeper to that on today's episode of GMB. But real quick, Broncos country, wanted to talk to you, wanted to tell you about our good friends over there at Superbook Sports. Why bet with the big boys this football season? Instead, try your hand with the local book. Superbook Sports, the sponsor of today's episode of the show. Try them out this fall. Superbook Sports is the book next door, just a dedicated team of the best odds makers in Las Vegas, making sure that you get the best prices and parlays anywhere. And now Superbook will give you a bonus of up to $250 when you sign up and wager on the same day and use the promo code Mile High. So bet with the best and use promo code Mile High this football season with Superbook Sports. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. All right, Broncos country, let's continue our conversation here from Wednesday's practice at the Centura Health Training Center. Let me flip up my handy-dandy notepad here in terms of talking about players that we saw in the side field, not dressed, dealing with some injuries ahead of the regular season. I think for Broncos fans, maybe some promising news here is that Jerry Jeudy, he was spotted on the side field doing some light work, some light movement, which is a good sign for him as he continues to make progress after dealing with a hamstring injury that had him carted off the field last week in the final day of joint practices against the Los Angeles Rams. And I would say, like, don't even read into this from the sense, okay, hey, he's doing some light movement. Okay, maybe he's going to be ready for week 1. I think the status right now for him is still highly questionable. That's one way that it was put to me, highly questionable. But I also wouldn't be surprised if he's ready. In my opinion, I think that Bo Lowry has done a really good job. You talk to players who have been dealing with some injury management stuff. They really love Bo Lowry's approach. Sean Payton loves his approach. And we've seen guys return. Like, I got to make mention of Mike McGlinchey and Brandon Johnson. On the same exact day, they suffered injuries where they had to leave practice. And that was the knee sprain for Mike McGlinchey. And then there was the ankle sprain here for Brandon Johnson. Both of those guys missed 13 days exactly and were able to come back ahead of schedule. So that is a great sign in terms of what the Broncos have going on. And look, we had a chance to speak with Mike McGlinchey following Wednesday's practice, and I asked him a question specifically about how he felt coming back out there really ahead of schedule after having the knee injury. Here's exactly what he had to say.
Yeah, it felt good. You always want to, obviously it was a little bit of a hiccup early in camp when I had that happen to the knee, but it was great to get back. Our training staff and our rehabilitation staff did an unbelievable job with the program and was able to get back a little bit quicker than expected. And live reps against a different opponent are always incredibly valuable. And those joint practices are a great, test. They're a great way to get your mind on how to compete in a game situation because every day at practice, it's basically like playing a preseason game. So it was incredibly valuable to get some live bullets from a different jersey. And I'm happy to be back for sure.
And so obviously you're going to get a lot of reps in those joint practices, which is why I think a lot of coaches view them as valuable to the operation and what you want to do, because you're going to get more of a realistic look that you're not going to get necessarily in practice, because in practice, you're getting the same exact scheme. Like if I'm Mike McGlinchey, I'm getting the same Broncos defensive scheme every single day versus a new opponent, a new look, and a new wrinkle that, quite frankly, you don't get a chance to study for that. You're going out there and you're trying to run your stuff and you're just reacting based on what this other team is doing. That's a good rep there. And I will say here, I did see a few plays against the Rams where Mike McGlinchey absolutely buried dudes in the run game. Love to see that overall for him, but it's going to face a very tough challenge week one when you have Max Crosby coming to town. You got Chandler Jones. They have Tyree Wilson, their first-round draft pick that they had there. And a lot of the reports out of Las Vegas suggest that, hey, this Raiders defense this year, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit more aggressive, and they could be a little bit revamped. And they gave the Broncos some problems last year. And we'll see if Denver's ready for the test come week one, which is just about a week and a half away. Broncos country. We'll have you covered every step of the way leading up to kickoff. And every day you're going to get a recap and you're going to get something that sets the table for the next day here on GMB. So appreciate you taking time to be here with us. Continuing on our injury stuff there, though, like we mentioned, good progress with Jerry Jeudy there. PJ Locke continues to recover from the ankle injury he suffered during training camp just about a week and a half ago. Not sure if he's going to be one of those players that goes on short-term IR, but that's something to monitor. Riley Moss continuing to do a little bit more out there, getting some conditioning done on the side field as he continues to make his way back from core muscle surgery. Damari Mathis missed that final day of joint practice against the LA Rams, did not play against the Rams in the preseason finale, which he wouldn't have played anyways because he's a starter, but was kind of limited in a sense here during the Broncos practice on Wednesday at the Centura Health Training Center. We don't know what it is, but he had his helmet, he had his jersey, he was doing stuff on the side field. So if he had both of those things with him, the jersey and the helmet, it's a promising sign forward. But we were talking about it at practice. I was talking with our good friend Troy Rank, who does the Broncos podcast with us here at Mile High Sports. They can't afford to lose a guy like Damari Mathis right now, considering where things are at. So very curious to see how the roster shuffling goes about, especially when they play some players on short-term IR. If they add Fabian Moreau back into the mix, what does that mean? Because the Broncos at that point will have, I think, 7 cornerbacks on the roster, maybe potentially 8 there, depending on what they decide to do. You have to figure out maybe what that is going to look like. What's the vision for a guy like Moreau? And who's going to step up at the outside cornerback spot if it's not Damari Mathis, if he's banged up? And my first inclination is to think Jaquan McMillan. He's obviously, I think, the next in line to back up either Surtain or Damari Mathis. So behind him is the question mark. Who's going to be? Is it Tremont Smith, which not a lot of Broncos fans have a lot of optimism in right now. Didn't really have a strong preseason at cornerback, but is an impact special teams guy, and you're going to need him to play that role significantly with the same Bassi expected to start inside the nickel there. So continuing on the injury report here, Chris Manhertz was dressed as well, participated in a small portion at the very beginning of Broncos practice. That includes team stretch, a little bit of a light walk-through period, but then he went on to the side field as he continues to make progress from an ankle injury he suffered a few weeks ago during practice. And then Demontre Jacobs, as we talked about a little bit earlier, the knee and the ankle sprain that we saw him encounter in that Saturday preseason game against the Rams, he's going to take some time to make his way back, but he is on the practice squad, so that should help out overall. But one thing we were introduced to here for the Broncos on Wednesday was, hey, new kicker, Will Lutz, who came in. And let me tell you this, Broncos country has a good leg. Saw him at practice, had a very effective day in the kicking game there, made some long field goals as well. I think the longest that I saw him make was 55. He didn't try anything longer than that in his first practice here at the team. He said, hey, I got here. And they said, you're kicking today? He said, all right, hey, let's go make it happen. But we got to hear from him a little bit. And I know a lot of Broncos fans have expressed their concerns about where he was at last year, 74.2% field goal accuracy. And a lot of fans wondering, why did Denver trade for him? Why didn't they just keep McManus if they're going for a guy who had a lower field goal percentage? I thought that Will Lutz actually gave us a really great insight into some of the personal struggles that he had and maybe why 2022 didn't work out the way that he wanted to. But he also took full accountability. Here's what he had to say.
Yeah, that was tough. I was a guy who's never had surgery in my life, and I went to 2 and 3 month span. So, mentally more than anything, it was the hardest thing I've gone through, missing a year. And, we had one surgery, thought I was coming back, and the next thing you know, it turns out I'm having a second one. So, the hardest thing is watching someone else do your job. And, that was difficult. I wanted to play. I wanted to be out there. But look, 2022, no excuses. I didn't have a good year. And that's just, that's all on me. It was mentally, I didn't feel like I was in the right space. Kind of felt like a rookie again after missing a year. And, I didn't play in front of fans in 2021 because of COVID. And then 2020, no fans. 2021, I didn't play. And so 2022, week 1 was my first time in front of fans in 2 years. So it was very eye-opening. I didn't handle it the right way. And so, I really spent the offseason working on my mentals and kind of getting back to where I was before that.
I think that anytime a player comes out and openly says, you know what, I didn't handle it the right way, I have so much respect for that, because it's hard as a player. It's hard as a man in general. And this is something we all struggle with. We have this thing that's called sometimes too much pride, right? Will Lutz, very open, reflective, saying, I could have handled it a lot better. I didn't do it the way that, I should have, and very open about that, very reflective, and obviously giving some love to obviously the new kicker that won the job in New Orleans there. No ill will, no hard feelings there. He understands the business side of it. And he even said that, hey, when you put it in somebody else's hands, there's not much you can do besides just keep going out there and doing your thing. And obviously he thanked Brett Maher and just gave him a lot of props, saying he's a terrific kicker. We know Brett Maher, former Bronco, now signing with the Los Angeles Rams there. So Denver just making some moves here. Will Lutz was the guy that Sean Payton is comfortable with, but I got a lot of respect for, a guy who's able to come out and say, this is something that, I struggled with, and this is why I struggled, being able to be open about it. We live in a time here where when it comes to pro sports and we talk about like what happened and the why, it's often misperceived as, okay, this guy's just making an excuse. This guy's just trying to justify why he struggled. I think that you need to give athletes more benefit of the doubt in situations like this, because, hey, at the end of the day, we're all human beings, man. And women, if you're watching this, at the end of the day, these guys have a massive platform in which they're viewed by so many people, but yet they are the same as us when they go home. They have their own issues they got to deal with. They have life stuff they got to deal with. They're humans too. And I always think we have to bring aside the human element here to covering pro sports, because I see it every day. Unfortunately, I see it, on our Facebook comment section here on Mile High Sports. You see a lot of ignorant comments. You see a lot of just insensitive comments about athletes, and very degrading and very demeaning. And you're never going to get that here on GMB, but overall, Denver's going to have a practice here this morning. I've got to get ready to jet off to that. But Broncos country, thank you so much for tuning into GMB here today. Special shout out to our friends over there at Superbook Sports. There's going to be some more changes with the Broncos roster coming forth, and obviously we'll have you covered on tomorrow's episode of GMB, what we learned from today's practice, and it kind of sets the table a little bit for Denver going into next week. So with that said, Broncos country, I'm Cody Roark. Make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel down below so you never miss out on Colorado sports coverage here at Mile High Sports, every team, every day. Appreciate you so much, Broncos country. I'll see you tomorrow. Until then, have a good one.